The restaurant was called the Gilded Crane, and it sat on the 14th floor of a building in Jeonju that most people pretended didn't exist. Not because it was hidden. No, it had floor-to-ceiling windows and a glowing sign you could see from 3 blocks away. People pretended it didn't exist because of who owned it. And today, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, the owner's mother had just walked through the front door. Everybody knew when Madame Yoon Soo-yeon arrived somewhere, because the temperature in the room dropped about 10 degrees. She was 51 years old, barely 5 feet tall, and she carried a handbag that probably cost more than most people's cars. Her silver hair was pinned in a perfect bun. Her eyes, sharp, dark, unblinking, scanned the restaurant like she was inspecting a crime scene. Behind her, 2 men in dark suits stood like statues. Bodyguards. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. "Table 5, Madame Yoon said, not to anyone in particular, just into the air, like the universe was supposed to obey. The hostess, a young woman named Bora, nearly tripped over her own feet rushing to pull out a chair. "Madame Yoon, welcome back. Can I get you? You seated someone at table 5 last week who smelled like garlic and cheap cologne." Madame Yoon didn't sit down. She just stared at Bora like she was memorizing her face for future punishment. "I told your manager. Did anything change?" Bora's mouth opened, closed, opened again. I wasn't informed. Useless. One word. That's all it took. Bora's eyes went glassy, and she backed away like she'd been slapped. That was Madame Yoon's gift. She could break a person with one word, one look, one silence that lasted just a beat too long. She'd done it to every server, every chef, every manager who'd ever worked at the Gilded Crane. 6 hostesses had quit in the past year, 3 sous chefs. 1 bartender actually moved to a different city, and today was about to be different. Because today, Audrey Anton was working the floor. Audrey hadn't planned to be in South Korea. That was the thing people never understood when she told them her story later. None of this was planned. She'd grown up in a small town outside Ibadan, spent 2 years studying hospitality in London, then followed a college friend to East Asia on what was supposed to be a 6-month adventure. That was 3 years ago. Somewhere between learning the language, falling in love with the food, and realizing she was actually good at this job, 6 months turned into forever. She was 26, tall, almost 5'10", with deep brown skin, close-cropped natural hair, and a gap between her front teeth that she'd hated as a kid, and now considered her trademark. She had a voice that carried without shouting, and a laugh that could fill a room. She also had absolutely no idea who Madame Yoon Soo-yeon was. "Table 5 needs service," the floor manager, Mr. Gook, whispered to her. His face was the color of old paper. "The woman sitting there she's very important. Very. Do not make mistakes." Audrey raised an eyebrow. "I don't make mistakes, Mr. Gook." "Audrey, I'm serious. She has destroyed people. She orders food, I bring food. That's how restaurants work." Mr. Gook looked like he wanted to say more, but another server was waving him down about a spilled drink, so he just pointed at table 5 and disappeared. Audrey straightened her apron, grabbed a menu and a water pitcher, and walked over. Madame Yoon was sitting with her back perfectly straight, reading something on her phone. She didn't look up when Audrey approached. "Good afternoon, ma'am. Welcome to the Gilded Crane. My name is Audrey, and I'll be taking care of you today. Can I start you with some water, or would you prefer tea?" Silence. Audrey waited. 3 seconds. 5. 10. Most servers would have panicked, repeated themselves, stammered, apologized for breathing. Audrey just stood there, patient, calm, holding the pitcher like she had all the time in the world. Finally, Madame Yoon looked up. Her eyes traveled from Audrey's shoes to her face with the slow precision of a laser. "You're not Korean?" "No, ma'am." "Where are you from?" "I grew up near Ibadan. That's in West Africa." Madame Yoon's expression didn't change. "I know where Ibadan is. I'm old, not ignorant." A pause. Why is a girl from Ibadan serving tables in Jeonju? Because I'm very good at it. Something flickered in Madame Yoon's eyes. Not warmth, exactly. More like surprise. Like a cat that had just noticed a mouse standing its ground instead of running. Sit down, Madame Yoon said. Audrey blinked. Ma'am, I said sit down. I want to talk to you before I order. Now, in any normal restaurant, a server sitting down at a guest's table would be grounds for immediate firing. But Audrey had learned something in her 3 years in Korea. Sometimes the most powerful thing you could do was match someone's energy, without flinching. She pulled out the chair across from Madame Yoon and sat. The two bodyguards exchanged a glance. Bora, watching from behind the hostess stand, looked like she might faint. Tell me, Madame Yoon said, folding her hands on the table. What do you think of this restaurant? Audrey considered the question carefully. The food is excellent. The bulgogi here is the best I've had in the region, but the service is inconsistent, and the ambiance tries too hard to be luxurious instead of just being comfortable. Dead silence. Then Madame Yoon did something that nobody in the restaurant had ever seen her do. She laughed. It was short. More like a bark, really. But it was real. Everyone else tells me this place is perfect, Madame Yoon said. They lie to my face and think I can't tell. I don't see the point in lying about food, Audrey said simply. Good food deserves honesty. Madame Yoon studied her for a long moment. I'm going to order now, and you're going to bring me exactly what I ask for, prepared exactly how I describe it. If it's wrong, I will know. Yes, ma'am. And stop calling me ma'am. It makes me feel like I'm at a government office. She picked up the menu. You may call me Madame Yoon. Yes, Madame Yoon. What followed was the most detailed, exacting food order Audrey had ever received. Madame Yoon wanted the japchae with extra sesame oil, but not too much. I should taste it, not swim in it. The kimchi jjigae had to be served in a stone pot that had been heated for exactly 4 minutes. Not 3, not 5. The rice, and she was very specific about this, had to come from the second batch of the day, because the first batch is always slightly overcooked and everyone pretends it isn't. Audrey wrote nothing down. She repeated every detail back, word for word. Madame Yoon raised one thin eyebrow. You have a good memory. I have an excellent memory, Madame Yoon. We'll see. 20 minutes later, Audrey returned with the food. Every single detail was correct. She'd personally gone into the kitchen and stood over the chef, a terrified man named Dong-sik who kept asking her why she was doing this, to make sure the stone pot was heated for exactly 4 minutes. She'd tasted the japchae herself to check the sesame oil level. She'd confirmed which batch the rice came from. Madame Yoon tasted each dish slowly, methodically, like a scientist conducting an experiment. Then she set down her chopsticks. This is the first time in 2 years that my order has been correct. Audrey allowed herself a small smile. I'm glad. Don't be glad. Be consistent. Madame Yoon picked her chopsticks back up. I come here every Tuesday. If you're not working next Tuesday, I will be very displeased. I'll be here. Good. Now leave me alone. I don't like people watching me eat. Audrey stood, gave a small bow, and walked back to the server station. Behind her, she could feel the entire staff staring at her like she'd just walked through fire and come out without a scratch. Bora grabbed her arm. How? What did you? She laughed. She never laughs. Audrey shrugged. I just treated her like a person. The following Tuesday, Audrey was there. So was Madame Yoon. Same table, same bodyguards, same exacting order, with 3 modifications that Audrey memorized on the spot. The Tuesday after that, same thing, and the Tuesday after that. By the 4th week, something strange was happening. Madame Yoon was arriving earlier, staying longer, and this was the part that truly shocked everyone. She was making conversation. Not small talk. Madame Yoon didn't do small talk. She asked Audrey questions that felt more like interrogations. Where did she learn to cook? Did she speak Korean before she arrived? What did her family think about her living abroad? Did she plan to stay? Audrey answered every question directly, without decoration or flattery. My mother thinks I've lost my mind, Audrey told her during week 5, refilling her tea. She calls me every Sunday and asks when I'm coming home. I tell her I don't know. She says I'm stubborn. I say I got it from her. Madame Yoon's lips twitched. Your mother sounds like a sensible woman. She'd say the same about you. You're both terrifying in the exact same way. I am not terrifying. Madame Yoon, with respect. The hostess hides in the bathroom when she sees your car pull up. A pause, then, that girl is weak. She can't even fold napkins properly. She's 22 and she's scared of you. She should be less scared and more competent. Audrey tilted her head. Or you could be a little kinder and she might surprise you. The table went very, very quiet. One of the bodyguards actually shifted on his feet, which for these men was basically a full-body flinch. Madame Yoon looked at Audrey with an expression that was impossible to read. Anger, respect, both? No one has spoken to me like that in 30 years, she said slowly. Then everyone around you has been doing you a disservice, Madame Yoon. The old woman said nothing for a very long time. Then she picked up her tea, took a sip, and said, Next week, I want you to add a dish to my order. Something from your country. Something your mother would make. I want to taste where you come from. Audrey's eyes widened. Really? Don't make me repeat myself. That night, Audrey went home to her tiny apartment in the Hanok village district and called her mother. Mama, I need your jollof rice recipe. Her mother, a woman named Dorcas, who had never been anywhere near Korea and had very strong opinions about Audrey's life choices, said, Why? There's a woman at work. She wants to try Nigerian food. Is she paying you extra? No, Mama. Then why are you cooking for free? Because she asked, and she doesn't ask for things. She demands them. So when she actually asks nicely, it means something. A long pause on the phone. Then her mother said, Use the tomato paste from the red tin, not the one in the tube, and don't let anyone tell you to add sugar. If God wanted sugar in jollof rice, he would have made tomatoes sweet. Audrey grinned. Yes, Mama. The following Tuesday, Audrey brought out the usual order. And then, at the end, she set down a small clay bowl of jollof rice with fried plantain on the side. Madame Yoon looked at it, looked at Audrey, looked back at the dish. She took a bite, chewed, swallowed, said nothing. Audrey's stomach did a slow, nervous roll. Then Madame Yoon took another bite, and another. She ate the entire bowl without stopping, which was something she never did. She always ate slowly, deliberately, with pauses between each dish. When she finished, she set her chopsticks. No, she'd used a spoon for this one. Set her spoon down and looked up at Audrey. Your mother, she said. She is a good cook. The best. This rice, it has anger in it, and love. At the same time, that's very difficult to achieve in food. Audrey felt her throat get tight. I'll tell her you said that. Madame Yoon nodded once. You will bring this every week, along with my regular order. Of course. Then Madame Yoon reached into her handbag and pulled out a business card. It was black with silver lettering. She placed it on the table and slid it toward Audrey. My son is having a dinner at the family estate this Saturday. A private gathering. 30 guests. He needs someone competent to oversee the service. She paused. I told him I found someone. Audrey picked up the card. The name on it read, Yoon Ju-hyuk Chairman. The Yoon Group below the name. In smaller text, Jeonju. Mokpo. International Audrey looked up. My son is a very busy man who surrounds himself with incompetent people because competent people are afraid of him. Madame Yoon stood, brushing invisible lint from her sleeve. You are not afraid. That is why I'm recommending you. Madame Yoon, I'm a waitress. I'm not an event coordinator. You are whatever I say you are. Be at the estate at noon on Saturday. Wear something professional. Do not be late. She walked out without another word. The bodyguards followed. Audrey stood there holding the business card, staring at the name, feeling like the floor had just tilted slightly beneath her feet. She had no idea what she'd just agreed to. She had no idea who Yoon Ju-hyuk really was, but she was about to find out. The Yoon estate sat on 12 acres of land outside Jeonju, at the end of a private road lined with old pine trees. Audrey's taxi driver refused to go past the main gate. "I'll wait here," he said, staring at the iron gates like they might come alive and eat him. "You go. I wait. Don't take too long." Audrey paid him, got out, and walked up to the gate alone. A guard checked her name against a list, looked at her, really looked, in a way that made her stand a little straighter, and then waved her through. The house was enormous. Traditional Korean architecture mixed with something modern and cold. All clean lines and dark wood and windows that reflected the gray sky like mirrors. There was a koi pond near the entrance. The fish were gold and white, and they moved through the water like they were being choreographed. Audrey had worn her best black dress, simple, fitted, professional, and a pair of low heels she'd bought specifically for this because everything else she owned was either too casual or too going to a wedding in Ibadan. She'd also brought her notebook, because if there was one thing Audrey Anton didn't do, it was show up unprepared. A woman in a dark gray suit met her at the front entrance. She introduced herself as Secretary Beck. "You're the one Madame Yoon recommended?" Secretary Beck looked skeptical. Not hostile, but clearly unconvinced. "That's me. Have you ever managed an event of this scale?" "I've managed a restaurant floor on New Year's Eve with a full house and a chef who set the dessert station on fire. I think I can handle a dinner party." Secretary Beck blinked. "Follow me." The next 3 hours were chaos. The kind of chaos that would have made most people cry. The catering team was behind schedule. The florist had delivered the wrong flowers. White chrysanthemums instead of white lilies, which apparently mattered enormously because of some tradition Audrey didn't fully understand, but respected immediately. 2 of the servers had called in sick, and the kitchen, an industrial-grade space that was bigger than Audrey's entire apartment, was in complete disorder because the head chef was in the middle of an argument with his sous chef about the proper temperature for serving galbi. Audrey walked into the kitchen, listened to the argument for about 90 seconds, and then said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "The galbi should be served at the temperature that makes the guest want a second helping, not the temperature that wins you an argument with your colleague. Sort it out in the next 10 minutes or I'll decide for both of you." The kitchen went quiet. Then the head chef and sous chef looked at each other, looked at Audrey, and got back to work. Secretary Beck, standing in the doorway, raised both eyebrows. By 4 p.m., the flowers had been corrected. The servers had been replaced with 2 staff members Audrey had called in personally from the Gilded Crane. The table settings were flawless, and the timing for each course had been mapped out to the minute. Audrey was in the main dining hall, adjusting the final place card, when she heard footsteps behind her. Heavy, deliberate. The kind of walk that belonged to someone who was used to entering rooms and having everyone turn around. She turned around, and there he was. Yoon Ju-hyuk was 33 years old, 6'1", and built like someone who spent his mornings in a private gym and his nights making decisions that affected hundreds of people. He had sharp cheekbones, dark eyes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and a jawline that could have been carved from stone. His hair was black, slightly longer on top, pushed back from his forehead in a way that looked effortless but probably wasn't. He was wearing a dark suit, no tie, top button undone, and he stood in the doorway of the dining hall with his hands in his pockets, watching Audrey the way you'd watch something you hadn't expected to find. "You're the waitress," he said. His voice was deep, controlled, the kind of voice that didn't need volume to fill a room. Audrey set down the place card. "And you're the son." A beat of silence. "My mother described you as the only competent person in Jeonju," he said, stepping into the room. "She doesn't give compliments, ever. So either you're remarkable or she's finally losing her mind." I'd go with the first one. He stopped walking. They were about 10 feet apart now, and Audrey could feel something. She didn't know what to call it yet, hanging in the air between them. Not tension exactly, more like the moment before a thunderstorm, when the sky goes very still and the birds stop singing. Ju-hyuk, he said. I know, it's on the place card. And you're Audrey. I know, it's on my name tag. She pointed to the small black badge on her dress. His mouth did something. Not quite a smile. More like the beginning of one that he caught before it fully formed. Everything is on schedule, he asked, looking around the room. Ahead of schedule, the galbi will be served at 5:15. The first toast is at 5:45. Your mother's seat has extra cushioning because I notice she shifts when she sits too long, and the lighting has been adjusted so it's warm but not dim. She mentioned once that she hates restaurants that make it too dark to see her food. Ju-hyuk stared at her. She told you that? During week 3. Week 3 of what? I serve your mother lunch every Tuesday. We've been doing this for 6 weeks now. Something changed in his expression. The careful blankness cracked, just slightly, and underneath it, Audrey saw something she recognized. Surprise mixed with curiosity. The look of someone who just discovered a door in a wall they thought was solid. She's never kept a server for more than 2 weeks, he said quietly. I know. Bora told me the survival statistics. Very encouraging. This time, he did smile. Small, barely there, but real. I'll leave you to it then, he said, and turned to go. At the doorway, he paused without looking back. Miss Audrey? Yes? The place cards are crooked. Audrey looked down. They were perfectly straight. She looked back up to respond, but he was already gone. The dinner went flawlessly. 30 guests, politicians, business owners, a retired general, 2 women who Audrey was pretty sure were actresses, and Madame Yoon, seated at the head of the table like a queen holding court. Audrey managed the floor, like a conductor managing an orchestra. Every dish arrived on time. Every glass was refilled before it went empty. When one guest had an allergic reaction to shellfish and started turning red, Audrey had an antihistamine at the table within 45 seconds because she'd checked the guest list for dietary restrictions earlier that day and stocked the supply cabinet accordingly. Throughout the evening, she felt Ju-hyuk's eyes on her. Not constantly. He was too controlled for that. But in flashes. When she handled a spilled drink without missing a beat. When she redirected a server who was heading the wrong direction with a subtle hand signal. When she made Madame Yoon laugh, again, by leaning in and whispering something about the retired general's toupee. At the end of the night, after the last guest had been escorted to their car, Audrey was in the kitchen organizing the cleanup when Secretary Beck approached her. Chairman Yoon would like to see you in his study. Audrey looked down at herself. Her dress was slightly wrinkled. There was a tiny stain near her hem from the shellfish incident. Her feet ached. Now? She asked. Now. The study was on the second floor. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a desk the size of a small boat, and Ju-hyuk, standing by the window with a glass of water in his hand, looking out at the garden below. He turned when she entered. Close the door, please. She did. Sit down. If it's all the same to you, I've been standing for 10 hours and I'd rather lean. He looked at her. Then he moved away from the window and sat on the edge of his desk instead, which put them at roughly the same height. You did something tonight that I haven't seen in a long time, he said. Managed a dinner party. Made my mother proud. He set his glass down. She doesn't show it, but I know her. And tonight, when she looked at you, there was something in her eyes I haven't seen since before my father died. Audrey was quiet for a moment. When did he pass? 5 years ago. A pause. She's been angry since then. At the world, at me, at everything that reminds her he's gone. She uses that anger like armor, and nobody's been able to get past it, until you. The room felt smaller suddenly. Closer. Audrey crossed her arms. Not defensively, just because she didn't know what else to do with them. I didn't do anything special, she said. I just didn't let her scare me. That is special. In my world, the world my mother built, the world I inherited, fear is the currency. Everyone is afraid of everyone else. The people who work for me are afraid of me. My competitors are afraid of my family. And my mother, he trailed off. My mother is afraid that if she stops being frightening, she'll have to actually feel the things she's been running from. Audrey looked at him, really looked, and saw, for the first time, the weight he was carrying. The suit, the estate, the title. Chairman. They were all armor, too. Different from his mother's, but armor just the same. You're not what I expected, she said. What did you expect? I don't know. Someone colder. I am cold. No, you're careful. There's a difference. He looked at her with those dark, absorbing eyes. And for a moment, neither of them said anything. The silence wasn't awkward. It was full, like a cup that had been filled right to the brim and was holding still, perfectly balanced. I want to hire you, he said. For what? I'm hosting a series of business dinners over the next 2 months, international guests, high stakes. I need someone who can manage the service, the staff, and the personalities in the room. Someone who doesn't flinch. I already have a job. I'll double your salary. Audrey stared at him. You don't even know my salary. Whatever it is, I'll double it. She wanted to say yes immediately. Something about this man, this house, this strange new world she'd stumbled into. It pulled at her like gravity. But she'd learned long ago that the things that pulled hardest were often the things you needed to think about most carefully. I'll think about it, she said. Ju-hyuk nodded. Fair. Secretary Beck will arrange a car to take you home. Audrey pushed off the wall and walked toward the door. She had her hand on the handle when he spoke again. Audrey. She looked back. The place cards were straight. I just wanted an excuse to say your name. The floor tilted again, just slightly, just enough. She walked out without responding, but halfway down the hallway, she let herself smile, wide, gap-toothed, and completely uncontrollable. She took the job. Of course she took the job. She told herself it was about the money, and the money was extraordinary, more than she'd ever made. But she knew, somewhere in a part of her brain she wasn't ready to examine yet, that it wasn't just about money. The first business dinner was a week later. Japanese investors, formal, precise, and absolutely unforgiving of any mistake. Audrey prepared for 3 days straight, learning names, studying seating customs, coordinating with a Japanese-speaking liaison to make sure every cultural detail was respected. The dinner went perfectly. The second dinner, Chinese tech executives, was even better. By the third dinner, word had gotten around. The chairman's new event coordinator was an African woman who spoke 3 languages, anticipated problems before they happened, and somehow, impossibly, had Madame Yoon's personal seal of approval. That last part was the one that shocked people most. Because Madame Yoon didn't just approve of Audrey. She had started requesting her presence at non-work events. Tea at the estate on Sunday mornings. A trip to the traditional market where Madame Yoon bought handmade ceramics, and Audrey carried the bags, and they argued about whether Korean stew or Nigerian pepper soup was more restorative when you were feeling under the weather. Pepper soup, Audrey said firmly. It clears your sinuses, heals your soul, and makes you cry in a good way. Ridiculous. Doenjang jjigae has been curing illness for centuries. So has pepper soup. Longer, probably. You're impossible. You like impossible. Madame Yoon sniffed. But she bought an extra ceramic bowl and said, For your pepper soup, as she handed it to Audrey. And through all of this, there was Ju-hyuk. He was present at every dinner, of course, but it was the moments between, the ones nobody else saw, that started to build into something Audrey couldn't ignore. He'd find her in the kitchen during setup. How's the preparation going? Fine. You look tired. I'm focused. It's different. You should rest more. You should worry less. And he'd leave. But 5 minutes later, a cup of tea would appear on the counter next to her. Hot, perfectly brewed, with a note from Secretary Beck that said, The chairman asked me to bring this, as if Secretary Beck was just a delivery service and not a woman with 3 degrees and a terrifying efficiency. Or there were the car rides. After each dinner, Ju-hyuk insisted on having a driver take Audrey home. And somehow, she never figured out the logistics. He always ended up in the back seat, too. I live in the other direction, she told him the second time it happened. I have a meeting in the morning. I'm going to the Jeonju office. The Jeonju office is also in the other direction. I'm taking the scenic route. At 11 p.m., I like the night air. She stared at him. He stared straight ahead. Neither of them acknowledged the ridiculousness of the conversation. But in those car rides, in the dark, with the city lights sliding past the windows, they talked. Really talked. Not about business, about everything else. He told her about his father, a man named Yoon Tae-soo, who had built the Yoon Group from nothing and then, in the span of 6 months, had gotten sick, declined, and died, leaving behind a business empire and a wife who didn't know how to exist without him. My mother was the strongest person I knew, Ju-hyuk said, his voice low in the darkness of the car. After he died, she became the hardest. There's a difference. You said that to me before, Audrey said, about being cold versus being careful. I learned it from watching her. Audrey told him about her father, a school teacher named Emmanuel who had died when she was 12. Heart failure, sudden, no warning. She told him about the years after, when her mother had worked 3 jobs to keep Audrey and her 2 brothers in school. That's why I don't flinch, she said. When you've watched your mother work 18-hour days and still find time to cook dinner and check your homework, nothing anyone says to you in a restaurant can touch you. Ju-hyuk was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I think our mothers would either become best friends or destroy each other. Audrey laughed. Probably both. Simultaneously. Everything changed at the 4th dinner. It was a private gathering for Ju-hyuk's inner circle, his closest business partners, his legal team, and a man named Director Shin, who managed operations for the other side of the Yoon Group. The side nobody talked about. Audrey had heard whispers. She wasn't naive. A family this wealthy, this powerful, this feared. There were always whispers. She'd heard the word Jopok murmured in the kitchen once, and when she'd looked it up, the translation had made her stomach drop. Organized crime. She'd asked Bora about it, carefully, casually. Bora had gone pale. Don't ask questions like that, Audrey. Just don't. But is it true? Everything about the Yoon family is true, and also nothing. It depends on who's asking and who's listening. Bora had grabbed her arm. You're safer not knowing. But Audrey was never the kind of person who felt safer not knowing. She was the kind of person who opened every door, looked under every rock, and dealt with whatever she found. So she kept her eyes open. And at the 4th dinner, those eyes saw something she couldn't unsee. It happened between the 2nd and 3rd courses. Audrey was in the hallway outside the dining room, coordinating with the kitchen, when Director Shin stepped out and made a phone call. He didn't see her. She was partially hidden behind a decorative screen. His voice was low, rapid, and the Korean was more complex than what Audrey usually encountered. But she caught fragments. The shipment from Mokpo, delayed 3 days. Someone talked. We need to handle it before the chairman finds out. And then, the part that made her blood go cold. If he doesn't cooperate, you know what to do. Make it clean. Director Shin hung up, straightened his tie, and walked back into the dining room. Audrey stood behind the screen, very still, for a very long time. She should have walked away. She knew that. Every survival instinct she had. Every lesson her mother had taught her about knowing when a situation was bigger than you, screamed at her to go home, pack her bags, and catch the first flight back to anywhere that wasn't here. But she didn't. Because that night, after the dinner, Ju-hyuk found her in the kitchen again. And this time, he looked different. The careful mask he always wore was thinner than usual. She could see the cracks. "Are you all right?" she asked. He looked at her, didn't answer right away. Then, I need to tell you something. Her stomach tightened. Okay. My family's business, it's not just restaurants and real estate. You know that, don't you? She nodded slowly. I've heard things. My father built this company with clean hands, but the people around him, the people who helped him when he was starting out, they weren't clean. And when he died, those people didn't leave. They got closer. My mother tried to keep them at bay, but she was grieving and they moved in like water filling a hole. And now? Audrey asked. Now I'm trying to get them out, quietly, carefully. It's like removing a parasite from a body without killing the patient. It takes time. Director Shin. Ju-hyuk's eyes sharpened. What about him? Audrey hesitated. Then she told him what she'd heard in the hallway. The silence that followed was the heaviest she'd ever experienced. It wasn't just quiet. It was loaded, like a held breath before an explosion. You shouldn't have heard that, Ju-hyuk said finally. His voice was very controlled, but she could see his hand gripping the edge of the counter. Audrey, this is exactly why I didn't want what? You. Near this, near any of this. He turned to face her fully, and for the first time, the mask was completely gone. What was underneath was raw and real and complicated. When my mother brought you into this world, I thought, one dinner. She'll manage one event and then go back to the restaurant and be safe. But then you stayed, and my mother started caring about you, and I started... He stopped. Started what? The kitchen was very quiet. Just the hum of the refrigerators and the faint sound of rain beginning to fall outside. I started needing you here, he said, and that's the most dangerous thing I could possibly do, because the people I need, the people I care about, they become targets. Audrey felt the weight of his words land on her like something physical. She should have been scared. Maybe she was, somewhere underneath. But the thing that rose to the surface wasn't fear. It was something fiercer. I'm not a target, she said. I'm not a chess piece. I'm not some fragile thing you need to protect by pushing away. I'm a grown woman who walked into this with her eyes open, and I'm standing here telling you that I'm not going anywhere. Audrey, no. You listen to me, Ju-hyuk. I've been taking care of myself since I was 12 years old. I crossed an ocean. I learned a new language. I made your mother, your terrifying, impossible, wonderful mother, actually like me. You think some man in a suit making phone calls in hallways is going to run me off? He looked at her, and something in his expression broke open. Not like something shattering, but like something blooming. Like a door that had been locked for years finally swinging open. You're the most stubborn person I've ever met, he said. I'll take that as a compliment. It was one. Everything accelerated after that night. Ju-hyuk brought Audrey into his confidence. Carefully, gradually, but completely. He told her the full picture of what the Yoon Group looked like beneath the surface. The legitimate businesses, restaurants, hotels, real estate, were the body. But threaded through them, like veins carrying something toxic, were the operations Director Shin and his people had built over the past 5 years. Money laundering, through property deals, protection schemes targeting small business owners, an illegal shipping operation running out of the Mokpo port that moved things Ju-hyuk deliberately avoided describing in detail. My goal, he told Audrey one evening, sitting across from her in the estate's library while rain streaked the windows, is to cut every one of those connections, legally, permanently. I've been working with a prosecutor in the capital, a woman named Judge Ryu, who's been building a case from the outside while I dismantle things from the inside. How close are you? 6 months, maybe less. But Shin suspects something. He's been watching me more carefully, testing my loyalty. And if he finds out about Judge Ryu's involvement, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. What can I do? Audrey asked. Ju-hyuk shook his head. You've already done more than you should. Just keep doing what you're doing. Keep managing the events. Keep my mother happy. And if anything ever feels wrong, if you notice anything strange, tell me immediately. I notice strange things every day. I work for your family." He almost smiled. Almost. The weeks that followed were a tightrope walk. On the surface, everything looked normal. Audrey continued managing events. The dinners grew more ambitious. A delegation from Dubai, a tech summit with European investors, a private concert for a group of Korean politicians that required Audrey to coordinate with 16 different vendors. She handled all of it, flawlessly. And each event pulled her deeper into the Yoon family's orbit, and deeper into whatever was growing between her and Ju-hyuk. They didn't name it. That felt important somehow, like naming it would make it real, and real things could be threatened. But it was there. In the way he always knew where she was in a room, in the way she could read his moods from across a crowded table, the slight tension in his shoulders when a conversation was going badly, the barely perceptible loosening when she walked in, in the way Madame Yoon watched both of them with an expression that was impossible to decode. One Sunday morning during their regular tea, Madame Yoon set down her cup and said, "My son is in love with you." Audrey choked on her tea. Actually choked. She coughed for a solid 30 seconds while Madame Yoon watched with the patience of a woman who had delivered a grenade and was waiting for it to go off. "Madame Yoon, don't insult me by denying it. I've watched him. I've watched you. I'm old, not blind. We haven't. I know you haven't. That's not the point. The point is what's happening whether you acknowledge it or not." Madame Yoon poured herself more tea with absolutely steady hands. "When my husband was alive, he used to say that love is not something you decide. It's something that decides you. You can fight it, and you will lose. You can ignore it, and it will get louder. Or you can accept it and deal with whatever comes next." Audrey's eyes were stinging. She blinked rapidly. "Madame Yoon, your son's world. It's complicated. All worlds are complicated. The question is whether you're brave enough to live in them." The old woman looked at her with an expression Audrey had never seen before. Tender, fierce, and unbearably sad all at once. "You made me feel something again, Audrey. After 5 years of feeling nothing. My son, he's the same. He's been frozen. And you are, somehow, making both of us thaw." Audrey's hand trembled around her teacup. "I'm just a waitress." "You were never just a waitress. You were the girl who sat down at my table when everyone else ran away." Madame Yoon reached across the table and placed her hand over Audrey's. Her fingers were thin and cool, but her grip was strong. "Be brave," she said, "for both of us." That night, Audrey couldn't sleep. She lay in her small bed in her small apartment, staring at the ceiling, and tried to make a list of reasons this was a terrible idea. He was a crime family's heir. She was a foreign waitress. His world was dangerous. Her visa situation was tenuous. His inner circle included people who made threatening phone calls in hallways. Her inner circle included her mother, who would absolutely lose her mind if she found out any of this. The list was long, convincing, logical. It didn't matter, because when she closed her eyes, she saw his face in the car that night. The mask gone, the real person underneath, saying, "I started needing you here," like it was a confession and a warning and a prayer all at once. She picked up her phone and typed a message. "Audrey, are you awake?" 3 dots appeared almost immediately. "Ju-hyuk, I'm always awake." "Audrey, your mother talked to me today." Ju-hyuk, "I know. She called me afterward. She said, and I quote, 'Stop being a coward and tell that girl how you feel before I do it for you.'" Audrey laughed out loud in her empty apartment. The sound echoed off the walls. "Audrey, so are you going to listen to her?" A long pause, longer than any pause in their conversations had ever been. Audrey watched the screen, feeling her pulse in her throat. Then, "Ju-hyuk. I've been listening to her my whole life. She's rarely wrong." "Ju-hyuk. Audrey, you already know how I feel. You've known since the first night in the study." "Ju-hyuk, the question isn't how I feel. The question is whether you're willing to step into my world, fully, knowing everything it contains. Audrey, I already stepped in. Weeks ago. You just didn't notice because I wasn't dramatic about it. Ju-hyuk, you served my mother jollof rice and now you're telling me you weren't dramatic? Audrey, that's not drama. That's cuisine. She could almost hear him laughing on the other end. Could almost see him in whatever room he was in. Probably the study. Probably alone. Probably doing that thing where he ran his hand through his hair when something caught him off guard. Ju-hyuk, Saturday. There's a place I want to take you. No business, no event. Just us. Audrey, like a date? Ju-hyuk, exactly like a date. Audrey, okay. Ju-hyuk, okay. She set the phone down and stared at the ceiling again. The list of reasons this was a terrible idea was still there. Still long, still logical. But now there was a second list. Much shorter. Just one item. He makes me feel like I can walk through fire. That list won. Saturday arrived like it had been shot out of a cannon. Audrey tried on 4 outfits before settling on a deep burgundy wrap dress and gold earrings her mother had given her before she left for Asia. She looked at herself in the mirror and thought, Mama, if you could see me now, you'd either be proud or horrified. Probably both. Ju-hyuk picked her up himself. Not a driver. Him. In a dark gray car that was sleek and fast and completely silent. He was wearing a navy blue shirt. No suit jacket. The first time she'd ever seen him without one. It made him look younger, more human. You look, he started. Finish that sentence carefully, she said, getting in. Like someone my mother would approve of, which, considering my mother, is the highest compliment anyone can receive. Acceptable answer. He drove them to a small town about an hour outside Jeonju, a place called Damyang, famous for its bamboo forests. They walked through the forest in the late afternoon light, surrounded by stalks that rose 30, 40, 50 feet into the air, creating a green cathedral above their heads. It was the quietest place Audrey had ever been. Not silent, there were birds and wind and the creak of bamboo shifting, but quiet in the way that lets your thoughts get louder. Why here? She asked. My father used to bring me here when I was a boy, Ju-hyuk said. They were walking side by side, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Whenever things got complicated, which was always, he'd drive us here and we'd walk and he wouldn't say anything for the first 20 minutes. He said the bamboo needed time to recognize us before we could have a real conversation. Smart man. He was. Ju-hyuk stopped walking. The light was golden now, filtering through the bamboo in long slanted beams that turned everything soft and slightly unreal. Audrey, I need to tell you something, and I need you to let me finish before you respond. Okay. He turned to face her, took a breath. Then, in 3 weeks, I'm making my move against Director Shin. Judge Ryu's team has enough evidence to bring formal charges. When that happens, it's going to be chaos. Shin has allies. Some of them are inside my own organization. There will be backlash, legal, financial, maybe worse. My mother will be in danger, I will be in danger, and anyone connected to me will also be in danger, Audrey said quietly. Yes, you're asking me to leave. I'm asking you to consider it. Audrey looked up at the bamboo above them. The stalks swayed gently in the breeze, bending but never breaking. She thought about her mother's voice on the phone. She thought about the ceramic bowl sitting on her kitchen counter. She thought about Madame Yoon's hand on hers. Be brave. For both of us. Do you remember what I told you in the kitchen? She said. You told me a lot of things in the kitchen. I told you I'm not going anywhere. Did you think I was being poetic? I thought you were being stubborn. Same thing. She stepped closer to him. Ju-hyuk, I didn't cross an ocean to run from something hard. I didn't make your mother laugh for the first time in 5 years just to disappear when things get dangerous, and I didn't fall in. She stopped herself, felt her cheeks warm. Started over. I didn't come this far to leave. The bamboo swayed. A bird called somewhere in the canopy. Ju-hyuk reached out and took her hand. His palm was warm against hers, strong, slightly rough. She felt it like a current, something electric, and quiet, and completely undeniable. "I will protect you," he said, "with everything I have. I know you will, but I need you to understand. I'm not someone who needs protecting. I'm someone who stands beside you. There's a difference." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he squeezed her hand, and something in his eyes, something that had been held back, guarded, locked away, finally, fully, let go. "Then stand beside me," he said, "and don't let go. Deal." They stood there in the bamboo forest, hand in hand, while the light turned gold around them. And Audrey thought, for the first time since she'd left home, for the first time in 3 years of building a life in a country that wasn't hers, This is where I'm supposed to be. The 3 weeks before the operation were the longest of Audrey's life. She continued working, events, dinners, Tuesday lunches with Madame Yoon. But underneath the routine, everything was coiled tight, like a spring being wound. Tighter and tighter until it couldn't hold anymore. She noticed things she hadn't before. The way Director Shin's men seemed to appear in places they shouldn't. Near the kitchen during events, in the parking garage when she was leaving late. She started varying her schedule, taking different routes home, keeping her phone charged and her bag packed with essentials, just in case. Madame Yoon noticed the change. "You're anxious," she said one Tuesday, watching Audrey pour tea with hands that weren't quite steady. "I'm fine." "You're lying. I've known you long enough to tell." The old woman set down her cup. "It's happening soon, isn't it? Whatever my son has been planning." Audrey looked at her. "He told you. He didn't need to. I'm his mother. I knew he was planning something the moment he started sleeping less and calling me more." She paused. "He's trying to fix what I failed to protect." "You didn't fail." "I did. After Tae-soo died, I let the wolves in because I was too broken to fight them. My son is cleaning up a mess I should have handled years ago." Her voice cracked, just barely, like a thin line appearing in porcelain. "And now you're both in the middle of it because of my weakness." Audrey set down the teapot and crouched beside Madame Yoon's chair. She took the old woman's hands in hers. "Listen to me," she said firmly. "You were not weak. You were grieving. Those are not the same thing. And your son is one of the bravest people I've ever known. He gets that from you. Not from weakness, from the strength you showed every single day for 5 years, even when you were hurting." Madame Yoon's eyes glistened. She blinked rapidly, the same way Audrey did when she was trying not to cry. And for a moment, the two women were mirrors of each other. Different ages, different countries, different lives, connected by something that transcended all of it. "You're good for this family," Madame Yoon whispered. "You're good for my son. He's good for me too. I know." A pause. "That's why I chose you. From the very first day. Not just because you were competent. Because you had the kind of heart that my son needed but was too proud to ask for." Audrey squeezed her hands. "When this is over, when it's all done, I'm going to cook you the biggest pot of jollof rice you've ever seen. And we're going to eat it together. All 3 of us." Madame Yoon smiled. A real, full, unguarded smile. "I'll hold you to that." The day came on a Thursday. Audrey woke at dawn to a message from Ju-hyuk. "Today, stay at the estate. Don't go anywhere alone." She got dressed, grabbed the bag she'd kept packed by the door, and took a taxi to the Yoon estate. The gates opened before she even had to identify herself. Secretary Beck was waiting. "This way," she said. Her face was tight, professional, but her eyes were scared. Audrey was led to a room on the 2nd floor, a sitting room with thick walls and no exterior windows. Madame Yoon was already there, seated in a high-backed chair, wearing a dark silk blouse and an expression of absolute composure. "Sit," Madame Yoon said, "and stop looking like that. We are Yoon women. We do not crumble." Audrey sat. She didn't point out that she was not, technically, A Yoon woman. It didn't seem like the time. "Where is Ju-hyuk?" she asked. "At the Mokpo port, with Judge Ryu's team. The arrests are happening this morning." "Arrests? Plural?" Director Shin, his lieutenant, a man named Kwak. 3 others involved in the shipping operation, and possibly more, depending on what they find. Madame Yoon's voice was measured, but her hands were clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had gone white. "My son has spent 2 years building this case in secret. Today is the culmination of everything." Audrey stared at her. 2 years? You think he decided this overnight? My son is methodical, patient. He inherited that from his father. A pause. "And his stubbornness, that he got from me." They sat together in that windowless room while the morning crawled by. Secretary Beck brought tea, then lunch, then more tea. Updates came in fragments. Through Secretary Beck's phone, through coded messages that Madame Yoon read with narrowed eyes and translated for Audrey in clipped sentences. "Shin has been taken into custody." Kwak tried to run. They caught him at the port entrance. "The shipping containers have been seized. Evidence is being catalogued." Each update loosened something in Audrey's chest, but the tension didn't fully release. Because there was one update that hadn't come yet. "Where is Ju-hyuk?" By 3 p.m., Madame Yoon had stopped pretending to be calm. She was pacing, a tiny, fierce woman walking back and forth across the room like a caged tiger. Audrey had never seen her pace before. Madame Yoon did not pace. Madame Yoon sat and made the world come to her. "Something's wrong," Madame Yoon said. "He should have called by now. Maybe he's busy. There's a lot happening. He always calls, always, even when his father was dying. Even then, he called me every hour." Her voice shook. "Something is wrong." Audrey pulled out her phone, called Ju-hyuk. Straight to voicemail, called again, voicemail, called Secretary Beck. "Where's the chairman?" We lost contact about an hour ago. His last known location was the Port Administration building. Judge Ryu's team is... Send a car to the port, now. Miss Audrey, the chairman specifically instructed... I don't care what he instructed. Send a car or I'll drive there myself. A long pause. Then, the car will be ready in 5 minutes. Audrey stood. Madame Yoon grabbed her arm. "If you go there, I'm going. Then you come back, both of you. Do you hear me?" The old woman's grip was iron. Her eyes were burning. "You bring my son home." Audrey nodded. "I promise." The drive to Mokpo took 90 minutes. Audrey spent every one of them staring at her phone, willing it to ring, cycling between terror and a strange, focused calm that she recognized from other moments in her life. The calm that comes when you've already decided what you're going to do, and all that's left is doing it. The port was swarming with police vehicles and unmarked cars. Audrey's driver was stopped at a checkpoint, but she flashed the Yoon Group identification badge that Secretary Beck had given her months ago, and the officers waved them through. She found Judge Ryu first, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and the bearing of someone who'd spent decades fighting uphill battles. "You're Audrey," Judge Ryu said. Not a question. "Where is he?" "Building 4, the administrative office. When we arrested Shin, one of his men, someone we didn't have on our list, barricaded himself inside with 2 port workers as leverage. He's demanding safe passage out of the country." Audrey's blood went cold. "And Ju-hyuk?" "He went in to negotiate, against my explicit advice." Judge Ryu's jaw was tight. "He said he knew the man, said he could talk him down." "How long ago?" 40 minutes. 40 minutes. In a room with a desperate man and 2 innocent people. Audrey looked at Building 4. It was a squat, concrete structure about 200 meters away. There were police positioned around it, but everyone was holding back, waiting, frozen in a standoff that could go either way. "I'm going in," Audrey said. Judge Ryu stared at her. "Absolutely not. That man is in there because he's trying to protect people. That's what he does, and I'm not going to stand out here while he does it alone." "Miss Audrey, you are a civilian." This is a law enforcement operation. I cannot allow—" "You can't stop me either. Not without physically restraining me, and I don't think that's going to look great in the press." Judge Ryu opened her mouth, closed it, looked at Audrey with an expression that was half frustration and half admiration. "If you get hurt, then I get hurt, but I won't." She turned and walked toward Building 4 before anyone could argue further. The door was unlocked. That was the first thing she noticed. Either Ju-hyuk had arranged it, or the man inside was too distracted to secure it. She pushed it open slowly. The hallway inside was dim and smelled like engine oil and sea salt. She could hear voices, muffled, coming from a room at the end of the corridor. She walked toward them. Her heels clicked on the concrete floor. She didn't try to be quiet. She wanted them to hear her coming. Surprises were the last thing anyone needed right now. When she reached the door, she could hear Ju-hyuk's voice. Calm, steady. The same voice he used in business meetings. The same voice he'd used the night he told her he needed her. "Jae-gil, you don't want to do this. You know you don't. There's still a way out of this that doesn't end with you in a cell for 20 years. A second voice. Higher, tighter, wound, up like a wire about to snap. "You don't get to tell me there's a way out. Shin promised. He promised we'd be protected, and now he's in handcuffs and I'm Jae-gil." Ju-hyuk's voice dropped lower. "Listen to me." Audrey pushed the door open. The room was a basic office. Desk, chairs, filing cabinets. 2 port workers, a man and a woman, both middle-aged, were sitting against the far wall, looking terrified but unharmed. Ju-hyuk was standing in the center of the room, hands visible, palms out. And across from him, backed against the window, was a young man who couldn't have been older than 25. He was thin, sweating, and holding a metal pipe in both hands like it was the only thing keeping him standing. Not a weapon in the dangerous sense. No gun, no blade. Just a scared young man with a piece of pipe and nowhere to go. Everyone in the room turned to look at Audrey. Who are you?" Jae-gil sputtered, raising the pipe. Ju-hyuk's eyes widened. "Audrey." "Shh." She held up one hand to Ju-hyuk without looking at him. All her attention was on Jae-gil. She studied him the way she'd studied hundreds of difficult customers, reading the posture, the eyes, the energy. And what she saw was not a dangerous man. What she saw was a frightened boy. "My name is Audrey," she said. Her voice was calm, even. The same voice she used when a restaurant guest was upset and needed to feel heard. "And I'm not the police. I'm not with any organization. I'm just someone who walked in because the people in this room matter to me." Jae-gil's hands were shaking. The pipe wobbled. I didn't want any of this. Shin recruited me 2 years ago. He said it was just deliveries, paperwork. I didn't know what was in the containers. I swear I didn't know." "I believe you," Audrey said. Ju-hyuk shot her a look. She ignored it. "Jae-gil," she continued, taking one slow step into the room. "I've been where you are. Not exactly here, but in a place where I felt trapped, where every door seemed closed and every option seemed terrible. And do you know what I learned?" He stared at her, said nothing, but he was listening. "I learned that the bravest thing you can do when you're cornered isn't to fight. It's to put down what's in your hands and ask for help. If I put this down, they'll arrest me. Yes, they probably will, but you'll be alive. You'll have your story to tell, and a judge is going to listen to that story. A real judge, not someone Shin controls. And she's going to see what I see right now, a young man who got pulled into something bigger than him and wants out." Jae-gil's chin trembled. His eyes filled. "I'm scared," he whispered. "I know." Audrey took another step. She was close enough now to reach out and touch the pipe if she wanted to. She didn't. She just stood there, present, solid, unafraid. "My mama," she said softly, "used to tell me something. She'd say, 'Audrey, the strongest. People in the world are not the ones who never fall down. They're the ones who fall down and then decide to stand up again. You can stand up, Jae-gil. Right now, you can choose something different. The room was so quiet she could hear the harbor outside. Water against concrete. The distant hum of a police radio. Then Jae-gil lowered the pipe. It hit the ground with a clang that echoed through the room. He sank to his knees, and he cried. Harsh, ugly, real tears that shook his whole body. Ju-hyuk moved immediately. He helped the two port workers to their feet and ushered them toward the door, where officers were already waiting. Then he turned to Audrey. For a long moment, they just looked at each other across the room. Jae-gil was being gently led away. The crisis was over. The building was safe. And Audrey was standing in the middle of it all, in her burgundy-wrapped dress and gold earrings, looking like she just walked out of an ordinary day, not a standoff at a crime-ridden port. You came, Ju-hyuk said. His voice was rough. I told you to stay at the estate. You tell me a lot of things. I listen to about 60% of them. Audrey. He was in front of her now, close. His hands were shaking. The first time she'd ever seen them shake. You walked into a room with a man holding a weapon. For me. For both of us. For the port workers. For that kid who's going to get a second chance because someone talked to him like a human being instead of a criminal. She looked up at him. That's what I do, Ju-hyuk. I walk into rooms where everyone else is afraid. That's how we met, remember? Your mother's table. He made a sound that was half laugh, half something else. Something deeper. I love you, he said. Just like that. No build-up, no warning. Like it was the simplest, truest thing in the world. I love you, Audrey Anton. I've been trying to find the right moment to say it, and there isn't one, because every moment with you is the right one. Her eyes filled. She blinked, twice, 3 times. Well, she said, her voice cracking just slightly, it took you long enough. I was being careful. You were being a coward. Your mother said so. My mother is always right. Yes, Audrey said. She is. The aftermath of that day unfolded over weeks. Director Shin and his associates were formally charged. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial records, communications, physical evidence from the shipping containers. Judge Ryu's case was airtight. The Yoon Group underwent a massive restructuring. Legitimate operations were separated, strengthened, and made transparent. Illegal channels were severed permanently. It was painful, like surgery always is. But when it was done, the company was cleaner, stronger, and wholly Ju-hyuk's. The media covered the story intensely. A young business chairman who dismantled organized crime from within his own family's empire. The coverage was complicated. Some outlets praised him, others questioned how much he'd known and for how long. But through it all, Ju-hyuk handled every interview, every press conference, every courtroom appearance with the same controlled, unflinching calm. And at every single one of those appearances, somewhere nearby, not in front of the cameras, but always within reach, Audrey was there. 3 months after the arrests, Madame Yoon hosted a dinner. Not a business dinner, not a political gathering, a family dinner at the estate. Just 3 place settings at the long dining table that usually seated 30. Audrey cooked. Jollof rice with grilled chicken, fried plantains, a pot of pepper soup that filled the kitchen with steam and made Secretary Beck sneeze 3 times in a row. Alongside it, because Madame Yoon insisted, was a spread of Korean dishes, japchae, kimchi jjigae in a stone pot heated for exactly 4 minutes, rice from the second batch. They sat together at the enormous table, Madame Yoon at the head, Ju-hyuk on one side, Audrey on the other. And they ate. Madame Yoon tried the jollof rice first. She chewed slowly, nodded. Your mother's recipe? Her exact recipe, red tin, no sugar. Tell her. Madame Yoon paused, set down her spoon. Tell her she raised a remarkable daughter, and that I am grateful she shared you with us. Audrey couldn't speak for a moment. She pressed her lips together, looked down at her plate, and took a very deep breath. She'd want to meet you, Audrey said finally. She'd want to tell you to your face that pepper soup is better than doenjang jjigae. She's wrong. She's stubborn. I know where you get it from. Ju-hyuk watched them. These two women, from opposite sides of the world, arguing about soup like it was the most important topic on earth. And he smiled. Not the small, controlled, barely there smile Audrey had first seen in the dining hall months ago. A real one. Full, unguarded. The smile of a man who had fought his way through darkness and come out the other side to find that the light was sitting right across the table, holding a spoon, with a gap between her teeth and fire in her eyes. After dinner, Audrey and Ju-hyuk walked in the garden. The night was cool and clear. Stars everywhere. More than you'd expect this close to a city. But the estate was far enough from the lights that the sky opened up in a way that made you feel small and vast at the same time. I spoke to Judge Ryu today, Ju-hyuk said. The trial is set for autumn. She expects full convictions. Good. She also said something interesting. She said the turning point, the moment she knew the case would hold, was when Jae-gil cooperated, gave a full testimony, named everyone, provided details that corroborated everything we'd gathered. Audrey looked at him. He cooperated because someone showed him kindness when he expected cruelty. He cooperated because of you. He cooperated because he was always a decent person who got pulled into something terrible. I just reminded him of that. Ju-hyuk stopped walking. They were near the koi pond. The fish were invisible in the dark water, but Audrey could hear them. Soft splashes, the sound of something alive and moving beneath the surface. I've been thinking, he said, about what comes next. The company is restructuring. The legal situation is resolving. My mother is, for the first time in years, actually happy. And you, he turned to face her. You changed everything. You know that, right? My mother was unreachable. My company was rotting from the inside. I was frozen. And you walked in with your jollof rice and your gap-toothed smile and your complete refusal to be intimidated by anything. And you woke us all up. I didn't do anything extraordinary, Ju-hyuk. I just showed up. Showing up is extraordinary, especially when everyone else leaves. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small box. Navy blue. Velvet. Audrey's brain went blank. I'm not... He paused. Took a breath. I'm not proposing. Not tonight. My mother would kill me if I proposed without giving her time to plan a proper event. You know how she is. Audrey laughed. A wet, thick laugh that came out with tears she didn't even know she'd been holding. He opened the box. Inside was a ring. Simple, elegant. A thin gold band with a single stone that caught the starlight and threw tiny rainbows across his hands. This was my mother's engagement ring, he said. My father gave it to her 50 years ago. She gave it to me this afternoon and told me, and again, I'm quoting directly, if you don't give this to Audrey tonight, I will disown you and adopt her instead. Audrey covered her mouth with both hands. This is a promise, Ju-hyuk said. Not a proposal, not yet, but a promise that I am yours, and you are mine, and whatever comes next, the messy parts, the hard parts, the beautiful parts, we face it, together. She took her hands away from her mouth, wiped her eyes, sniffed loudly and inelegantly. You know, she said, her voice wavering, in my culture, before a man can give a woman a ring, he has to visit her family. And there are traditions, negotiations. Her mother has to approve. I know, that's why I called your mother yesterday. Audrey's jaw dropped. You... what? Secretary Beck helped me set up the call. Your mother and I talked for 45 minutes. She told me about your childhood. She told me about your father. She told me that if I ever made you cry for the wrong reasons, she would fly to Korea personally and I'm not going to repeat the rest because I think she was being creative with her threats. Audrey was full-on crying now. Happy tears. The kind that come from a place so deep you didn't even know it existed until someone reached it. And at the end, Ju-hyuk continued. She said, Take care of my daughter, but more importantly, let her take care of you. She's stubborn enough for both of you." Audrey laughed through her tears. "That sounds exactly like her. I also spoke with your brothers. Emeka gave me a lecture about proper courtship. Damilola just kept saying, 'Welcome to the family, man,' before I'd even asked anything. That is 100% Damilola." Ju-hyuk held out the ring. "So? Will you wear this? Not as a fiancé, not yet, but as the woman who walked into my mother's impossible world, sat down at her table, and refused to leave." Audrey looked at the ring, looked at him, looked up at the stars. She thought about the girl from Ibadan who'd crossed an ocean, the waitress who'd sat down at table 5, the woman who'd walked into a standoff in a burgundy dress and talked a scared young man into putting down a pipe. She thought about every step that had led her here, every Tuesday, every car ride, every argument about soup, and she realized that none of it was random. All of it had been leading, somewhere, here, to this garden, to this man, to this moment. She held out her hand. "Yes," she said, "but I'm warning you, your mother and my mother in the same room at the same time. The world isn't ready." He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Of course it did. "The world has never been ready for the women in my life," Ju-hyuk said. "I've learned to just hold on and enjoy the ride." Audrey grinned. Wide, gap-toothed. Uncontrollable. "Good answer," she said. 6 months later, Madame Yoon Soo-yeon flew to West Africa for the first time in her life. She was accompanied by her son, his fiancé. The proposal had happened 3 months earlier at the Gilded Crane at table 5 on a Tuesday, because some things had to come full circle, and Secretary Beck, who had packed 5 emergency kits and a Korean to Yoruba phrasebook. Dorcas Anton met them at the airport. She was a small woman with Audrey's exact gap-toothed smile and a handshake that could crack walnuts. She looked at Madame Yoon. Madame Yoon looked at her. 2 mothers, 2 countries, 2 lifetimes of strength and loss and love. "I hear you think your stew is better than my soup," Dorcas said. Madame Yoon raised one thin eyebrow. "I don't think, I know." Dorcas smiled. "Come to my kitchen, I'll change your mind. I'd like to see you try." They walked off together side by side, already arguing. Behind them, Ju-hyuk and Audrey watched. "This is either going to be wonderful or a disaster," Ju-hyuk said. Audrey took his hand, squeezed it. "Both," she said. "Definitely both." And she was right. This story hit different, didn't it? Leave your comment and tell me, which moment gave you chills? Like this video and smash that subscribe button, because the next story, you're not ready for what's coming. Share this with someone who believes love has no borders.